The Ugly Duckling. The story begins at the edge of the pond, a place that should feel like home. The sun warmed the water and the reeds swayed in a gentle breeze. The duckling watched its brothers and sisters glide across the surface, their movements smooth and synchronized. It wanted to join them, to be part of that easy harmony. So it waddled to the water and tried to mirror them exactly, dipping its head and paddling its feet. But each time it drew near, a small space would open. A sibling would drift just out of reach. The mother duck would glance over, her eyes holding not anger, but a quiet hesitation.
There were no loud words or harsh actions. The rejection was a subtle thing, a constant, quiet pressure. It was in the way the group closed ranks when it approached, the way a game would pause for a moment before continuing without it. These small exclusions accumulated like drops of water. Each one was light on its own, but together they created a heavy feeling.
The duckling began to question its own perception. It looked at its reflection in the water, searching for the flaw that everyone else could see. It started to believe the problem was internal, a fundamental part of itself that it could not understand, but that made it unworthy of belonging. The moment of realization came during a simple meal. The duckling moved to eat beside its mother, and she shifted her weight, creating a small but definite distance. It was not a violent push, but a gentle, deliberate retreat. In that moment, the duckling understood that its very presence caused a subtle discomfort to its own family. The ache was not from a single hurt, but from the quiet understanding that it was separate. A deep, quiet ache of unbelonging settled in its heart, a feeling that the safest place it knew was not safe for it at all. It was the first conscious thought of being truly alone. The quiet exclusions grew sharper. The pond, once a place of soft light and gentle sounds, now held a chill. Whispers began to travel on the air, names meant to wound. The other ducklings would swim in wide arcs to avoid getting too close. Their laughter cutting off from the ugly duckling approached. The atmosphere turned cold and unwelcoming. Seeking a moment of peace, the duckling hid itself among the tall reeds at the water's edge. From this shelter, it watched the life of the pond continue without it. It saw its siblings playing a simple game of chase, their movements fluid and connected. It observed its mother preening another duckling's feathers, an act of care that was never offered to it. The joy was so clear, so easy, and it was a world from which it was completely shut out. The final push came from a sibling. It was not a shout, but a low comment made to another, just loud enough to hear. "Why does it even try? It does not belong here." The words were not the cruelest it had heard, but they held a simple, undeniable truth. The duckling felt the truth of them settle deep inside. It was a confirmation of its deepest fear. In the silence that followed, a heavy calculation began. The duckling weighed the sharp, constant pain of staying against the vast, terrifying fear of the unknown. The pond was a familiar hurt, a known quantity of loneliness. Then a single memory surfaced, warm against the cold reality. It was the memory of its mother's wing, sheltering it on the first night after it hatched. That feeling, that brief moment of pure safety and love, became an anchor. It was a reminder of what belonging should feel like, a feeling it was not experiencing here. The decision to leave did not come with drama or anger. It arrived as a quiet, heartbroken understanding. The pain of staying, of enduring this coldness day after day, had simply become greater than the fear of what lay beyond the pond. This was the internal shift, the moment the duckling stopped hoping for acceptance from those who could not give it and started choosing itself instead. It was a move toward self-preservation, a first step toward finding a place where it might not have to hide in the reeds. The duckling stood at the very edge of the pond. The familiar water lapped softly against its feet, a final goodbye from the only home it had ever known. Behind it lay the cold certainty of rejection. Ahead stretched a world of shadows and strange shapes, a dark forest that seemed to swallow the light. The boundary between the known and the unknown was a simple line in the soil, but crossing it felt like the most difficult thing in the world. Taking that first step required a different kind of courage. It was not the courage to face a known enemy, but the courage to step away from a familiar pain into a vast uncertainty. The fear of the unknown was a heavy, instinctual pull, a voice telling it to stay where things, however bad, were predictable. But the memory of the cold glances and the whispered words was stronger. It lifted one foot and placed it down on the unfamiliar ground. The soil felt different. It was drier, packed with twisting roots and crumbled leaves. The air carried new smells of damp earth and decaying wood. Strange sounds echoed from the deep shadows of the trees, creaks and rustles that held no meaning. The duckling moved forward, each step a small victory over fear. It did not get far before the sky began to change. The light faded quickly, and a wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. The gentle rustle of leaves became a loud roar as the storm arrived with sudden force. Rain fell in heavy sheets, and the wind whipped through the trees. This was the world's immediate answer to its bravery, a hostile challenge. The duckling pushed on, its feathers quickly becoming soaked and heavy. It scanned the gloom, its heart beating fast. Then it saw it, a large, hollow log lying on its side. The opening was just big enough. It scurried inside, pressing its body against the dry, rough wood. The sound of the storm was muffled now, a distant fury. In the dark, safe space, the duckling caught its breath. This was its first independent act of survival, a choice made entirely for itself. It had navigated the first immediate threat. The hollow log was not a home, but it was a shelter. It was proof that even in the frightening unknown, there could be pockets of safety, and that resilience was born from taking that first terrifying step away from what you know. The scariest step was behind it. Alone in the hollow log, with the storm raging outside, the duckling's mind drifted back to the pond. The memories came not as a single wave of pain, but as separate, clearer pictures. It recalled the sting of a turned back, the coldness in a glance. But it also remembered something else, something softer. It remembered the warmth of its mother's wing on that very first night. That memory felt different now. It was no longer a comfort. It was a measure of what had been missing. These thoughts were bittersweet. They brought a deep sadness, but also a new understanding. The duckling saw that the problem was not entirely its own fault. The pond was simply a place that could not hold its difference. The love it remembered was real, but it was not enough. It was a love that had conditions, a love that asked it to be something it was not. This realization was a quiet ache, but a clearer one. Outside, the storm continued its fierce work. The wind howled and the rain beat down, washing the forest clean. Inside the duckling, a similar cleansing was taking place. The storm of emotions, the hurt, the confusion, the longing began to settle. It was a necessary release, a letting go of the old hope that the pond could ever be a true home. The duckling started to reframe its own story. This was not just a tale of being cast out. It was a story of choosing to seek something better, even when the path was unknown. This internal shift was as vital as the physical journey. It was the beginning of emotional resilience. In the solitude of the log, the duckling learned to comfort itself. It tucks its head under its own wing, creating its own small circle of warmth. It learned to breathe through the fear. This was a vital skill, born from pure necessity. It was a strength that could never have grown in the confined space of the pond, where it was always looking outward for approval. The payoff was a quiet emergence. A new strength settled in its heart, not loud or boastful, but steady and sure. It was the strength of self-preservation, the understanding that its own well-being mattered. The duckling was still small and alone in a vast world, but it was no longer defined by the rejection it had left behind. It was now defined by the courage of its search. The story of the ugly duckling shows us that true strength is often a quiet choice to honor oneself. It is the courage to walk away from a place of painful belonging, trusting that a gentler world exists. This narrative validates the difficult but necessary journey toward self-acceptance. We can use this story as a gentle anchor for conversations with our children. It opens a door to talk about empathy for those who feel different, the resilience needed to navigate hardship, and the quiet bravery of being true to who you are. It reminds us that our worth is not determined by the first pond we find ourselves in.
The video ends here. Please subscribe, like, and share for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.